Hey, welcome to the RDC Hangout, the Redesign Challenge Hangout, and tonight's Hangout is about design thinking. I'm Lisa Hollenbach. I'm a community guide who has infiltrated the communications team for right now, and I'm bringing you the Hangout tonight with two experts in design thinking. I've got Dan Ryder from Maine, and I've got Jessica Cuthbertson from Colorado with me tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to them so that they can tell you a little bit about their own brilliance. So go ahead, Dan. Tell our guest tonight a little bit about yourself.
Hey, my name's Dan Ryder. I'm an English teacher at Mount Blue Campus in Farmington, Maine, where I've been teaching for, coming up close to 20 years now. I use design thinking in my classroom, where I teach 9th grade humanities all the way up through AP Lit, and a pop culture elective in between there, and a few other classes as we need them. And yeah, I'm super excited. I'm also about being here tonight. I'm also one of the moderating team for DTK12 Chat, which is a weekly design thinking Twitter community. We get together on Wednesday nights, a couple hours from now, as a matter of fact, 9 o'clock Eastern every Wednesday night, and talk design thinking. And but we're open 24/7. So anytime you want to use that hashtag DTK12 Chat and talk about the ideas we're talking about tonight, it's a great opportunity to get involved in a really cool community. And I've got a bunch of other cool stuff in other communities I'm involved in that I'll talk about later when we get into more ways of integrating design thinking into your classroom.
Awesome, awesome. And I think we just found another area that we need to talk about, because I teach some pop culture too. So I'm thinking, you know, the wheels are spinning. So we'll put that on the back burner for now.
Or you might say they're ideating.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Right? Good catch, good catch. Yes, go ahead and tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Cuthbertson, and I am by trade a passionate adolescent literacy.
In other communities I'm involved in that I'll talk about later when we get into more ways of integrating design thinking into your classroom.
And I think we just found another area.
Somebody's got their audio on.
All right. Are we good?
Sorry,
I sounded amazing.
Yeah, you did. All right, Jess, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so again, I'm Jessica Cuthbertson, and I'm from Aurora, Colorado, where by trade I am a adolescent literacy or middle grade English language arts teacher. And passionate teacher leader, and one of the things that I've been geeking out on the last couple years is design thinking, in addition to some other things. So I've been able to use it in a couple different professional contexts, and like Dan, I will share a little bit with you about some of the networks that I've been able to use it with, but primarily in my role the past 3 years as a teacherpreneur with the Center for Teaching Quality, as well as in my classroom a little bit, with my school and with my colleagues in my PLC. So those are some of the places that I've been able to put design thinking in action, and I really think it's a powerful process for educators that once you learn it, it's almost impossible to unlearn it, and so it's almost like growth mindset or other types of thinking and processes that sort of once it's an ingrained part of your culture, it's almost impossible not to ideate or design think. So I think it's really powerful. It's spreading rapidly, and I think it has the power to transform the way we school and the way that we leverage teaching and learning across the nation.
Great, thank you. And I'll tell you that the first time I was exposed to design thinking and the powerful things coming from IDEO was in 2012, and it was just off the Group Genius conference. That was something that came from the Gates Foundation, but in a second event sponsored by the Gates Foundation called, it was a Learn Zillion Dream Team, and it was called Teach Fest, where teachers were brought together to write Common Core lessons, and I believe it may have been the first one, and they did have some presentations there, and IDEO came. And it was one of those sessions that just by the presentation looked amazing, just from what it said in the brochure. And I was drawn right to it. And I do remember a friend of mine that I still talk to today from that space was designing a better commute for me. Like today we might design a wallet, or we might design any one of those exercises. On that particular day he was designing a better commute. Now I'm not sure how you design a better hour commute, but he did a nice job of finding me things to do along the way to keep myself entertained. But that was my first exposure. And I have to say, it's kept my interest in all this time. And I've read a little bit about the book Creative Confidence by the Kelly brothers, and done a lot of internet research. Used it to some degree in my classroom and some degree in professional development. And I think that Jess, probably yourself and Lori and maybe Val could attest to that anytime there's a workshop somewhere and my session isn't opposed to it, you will find me there even if I've seen it before. So it's an area that really just kind of draws me in. And I've been really excited about this GHO, and the both of you know that I've been trying to make this happen since May, so today is so exciting for me. So I'm so happy to have you here talking tonight. And this really just feeds right into the passion I have for this Redesign Challenge, and the reason I just love being involved in this. And it's really guided by all of this, the idea behind design thinking, and has teachers coming in and telling their stories and ideating and prototyping and coming up with solutions to some of the toughest problems in education. So with that, where are we in Redesign Challenge at this particular place? Well, our innovators have been chosen by the community as some of the most innovative but also feasible ideas that can be prototyped and can be put out as recipes to the community, the larger education community, who then can take their ideas and can try them and test them and report back. So in this time between the time that the ideas were submitted and this Friday, the innovators have been doing a little bit of research. They've been learning a little bit about human-centered design. They've been doing a little bit of user research and finding a little bit out about what teachers need, because we know that that's probably the most important thing when we're designing something, is who is going to be using this, and what do they need, and what do they need to get out of the experience. And they're learning a little bit about, I guess we'll talk a little bit later, but a little bit about breaking the rules, and a little bit about innovating and making new things, and coming up with creative solutions to problems that have been plaguing us for a really long time. And I'm going to kick it over to you, Jess, to tell us a little bit, because Jess is going to be joining us for Innovators Weekend this coming weekend. What have you been doing to prepare yourself to share your idea with the innovators coming and the experts coming to help you this weekend?
Sure. So one of the ironic things about this hangout is that we're talking about design thinking, which is almost counterintuitive, right? Because design thinking is really something that is best experienced. And so one of the things I've been doing to prepare for Innovators Weekend is interviewing, either virtually or live, several of my colleagues that I admire and respect, and that have different roles in the system. So, for example, an assistant principal, a teacher leader who might be on the user end of my challenge around video-based professional learning, an ed tech coach, an established teacher leader who's done some work with video-based professional learning and has pursued, dual certified in the national board process and has used video that way. So I've been gathering a lot of data from a lot of different experts in the field around their experiences with my particular challenge. And just to echo what you said, Lisa, I think this is perhaps sometimes one of the most overlooked components of the process, is that kind of that empathy building and rapport building in the early phases of design. And I think it's something that kids get really right, and that adults sometimes gloss over and skip over because it's so fun to prototype and kind of do the other parts of the process. And because I think we kind of hold our ideas sacred, and we go in really thinking that we know what it is that we're going to design, and so we might sort of skew our questions or kind of limit the kind of feedback that we get in that early phase to really drive some more creative designs. So I think this is huge, and this is one of the things that I think middle schoolers are really well positioned, and kindergartners, and probably AP seniors too, are really well positioned to teach us how to do better, because they will ask the most off-the-wall questions in these early phases that sometimes lead to some really fruitful ideation later on in the process. And I think adults sometimes ask safe questions, or don't ask enough people, or are challenged with listening to some of the feedback that they're getting in those early phases. So I'm really trying to prepare by gathering as much input from as many different sources as I can, and then trying to synthesize and look for some of those common threads that I might lift up with the innovators this weekend. And then a couple other things that have been really helpful that Redesign Challenge set me up to prepare for. We're just sending out links to a couple TED Talks, and I'll add those in the group chat. But just kind of refreshing my mind around what is this process all about, and thinking about how it works in non-education contexts has been really helpful, right? So there was one around the Google Glass concept and how Google has used rapid prototyping, and sort of linking to what we might take from that in the education field. And then the other one was around the Better Block project, and so how neighborhoods and communities are using design thinking to reimagine living spaces and communities. So I think that's really powerful, because I think sometimes we get stuck in this education vacuum, and it's really hard to think about how we might do things differently because we know education so well. And so looking at what others in different fields are doing with design thinking can really kind of open our mind in terms of creativity and possibilities.
Yeah, I have to say that has been my favorite part of this whole experience of working with the Redesign Challenge, is that the focus on looking outside and trying to find that analogous inspiration, trying to find what works somewhere else and trying it here. I think some of the most creative things can come into what we do by just looking outside. Maybe the answer is not inside our box. And from maybe week 2 in the process of working with this, when I first really started to get the concept of that inspiration from outside, I've really kind of been obsessed with it. So it's I guess you could be obsessed with worse things, right?
For sure. My first design thinking mentor did warn me that it's highly addictive. So I've never met a person who, once you do your first design thinking process, you're always back for more.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the different trinkets and those kind of things that you start to collect, Post-it notes and different kinds of pens and different papers and so many neat things. My classroom is full of puffy balls and pipe cleaners and you name it. All right, Dan, I'm going to kick it over to you, and I know that you are expert in design thinking in your classroom. So why don't we start with, I know that you weren't always the guru of design thinking.
Yeah. Oh, you use the expert word. As my grandfather had this awesome joke he used to tell all the time. That was what the definition of an expert is: a former spout of water. So yeah, and that's about where I'm at. Yeah, when we talk about expertise, I like to think I am well versed, and I like to consider myself a veteran of using DT in the classroom at this point. But no, I haven't always been doing it. I was a project-based learning junkie for several years, and then it was just a few years ago I stumbled on the DT K-12 chat Twitter community and realized that the piece that I was missing from project-based learning was the empathy piece that Jessica was just talking about. That is the crux of what makes DT different from everything else. It's focusing on the user. It's focusing on the human aspects of it. And when we start framing projects and problems in those ways, then we're always talking about doing authentic problem solving, but it's not really authentic until there's a user, right? Now and then we can get into the conversation about does a user always have to be human? Can it be a pet? Well, yeah, it can, but that's a separate conversation for another time. Point is, once you have a user in mind and a person who's going to use the thing that you're designing, it changes the emotional investment, the emotional intensity of the project, and it gives it more legitimacy and a greater reason to do it to begin with. So finding out about that and realizing that that was the missing piece for my project-based learning work, I just went completely whole hog, and the catalyst really was that Twitter community and the work of Mary Cantwell and the deep design thinking process, where she took kind of the best of the IDEO method and some of the other cool models. I think IDEO is the one that she really focused on the most. But there are other models that informed it, and she distilled it down into these 4 stages deep: discover, empathize, experiment, produce. And she did that with the intention of getting second graders to be able to do design thinking in her classroom. And I went, well, if her second graders can do it, then my ninth graders can do it, and I might be able to do it. So we stand a shot. But I love that you can memorize that, you can learn that, you can understand what those processes mean. And I also love the fact that early on in my introduction to it, I realized it's not a linear process. Earlier, Jess was talking about like people want to go right to the experimenting, and at first I was like, no, we have to trust the process, and we've got to do the empathizing first. And I realized that from like my brain, my adult classroom manager brain, I'm like, yes, we have to do the thing, and I need to be true to the spirit of the DT. But when you have a 14-year-old who just really wants to put crap together with Lego, or really wants to cut open a toilet paper tube and turn it into a hallway game, then you just need to let that happen. As long as, and what we do, we have up on the wall, we have this big DT chart, our deep process, and we chart our projects as they go. And there's a huge barrier that says you can't cross to produce until you've empathized. So if you need to experiment, to play, and explore, and that's what suits your brain before you discover or before you empathize, that's fine, because we all get excited about that act of making, and that's great. The key is you got to come back to the empathy, and that's, if you don't come back to the empathy, and you don't come back to the empathy again, and you don't come back to the empathy again, that's the only time you're really doing it, quote unquote, wrong, because you've missed the point. Mm-hmm. So making that realization and having that understanding that this thing can be cyclical, this thing is about empathy, and that proved to be the big drive. And in so doing, I also realized, and what has really pushed me and has made me really love it that much more, is realizing that DT does not have to be about projects. That's a huge misconception. Everybody's like, well, what am I going to do for my design challenge? I don't know. I'm like, well, do you have them write an essay, English teacher? And they say, yes. I go, well, guess what? We don't call it writing an essay in my classroom anymore. We call it designing a piece. And we design a piece of writing. So who's your user? Who's going to read it? Who's going to be your reader? Well, you are. So who should you ask and empathize with about what's going to interest me when you write something? When we talk about hook introductions, they're like, is this good enough? I'm like, I'm not interested, so no. And they go, it's so arbitrary. I'm like, but I'm your user. Like, if you want to write something for a different audience that's going to love what you write, tell me who your audience is, and let's have a conversation about you meeting their needs, and go interview your best friend that you want to read the essay and really read it and actually give you feedback on it. Because I'm guessing you don't want that to happen. But anyway, just changing that mindset. So now we do literary analysis through a design thinking lens. We have discussions through design thinking. We explore history and art through design, as opposed to looking at it from either a reader response point of view or a very objectivist, let's analyze all the parts and the pieces. Now we get to talk about readers as audience. We get to talk about creators as designers, and it's I think it has transformed my classroom, and I think it's transformed kids' attitude towards their learning in a really positive ways.
Wow. So I'm gonna guess. I'm a bit, first. You're making me want to change everything I do. So
Yay! I mean, no, you don't have to change everything you do. You do great work, Lisa. You do great work. Don't let this. This isn't about you.
I have great things, but just the way you describe that designing a piece, that makes me want to write something. So
Right.
I'm thinking that your kids probably feel the same way. And so
I still don't get their homework done. But that's a different issue. That's a different issue.
But if you hand me a paper that says write an essay, it's very different than says design a
Right.
piece. And if I approached it in this way, as a designer, for me, that makes it way cooler than just writing an essay. So, it is going to make me rethink, some of those things. So, thanks for that, because I like when people push me. And my next question for you is I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, so my question is always why? What's your why for doing this? So you had to have that moment, that I was just listening to you, and you had to have that moment where you thought to yourself, I'm making a change. What was your why?
My that's a really good question, and I recommend listening to the Freakonomics episode about the response. That's a really good question. Why? Well, I am constantly searching for the motivator in the room and trying to figure out what is going to touch the affect for my kids. And I teach in rural Western Maine, regional high school. We serve 11 communities. There are some kids who come to our school every day who have more people in the high school, and they see more people there than they see in the town they live in. And so the population is really unique. We have affluence as well as just abject poverty. We have a little bit of everything. We're like this crazy suburban but not rural but not rural community. We have a college campus in town, so we have this amazing arts culture, but we also love the Demolition Derby every fall. And the parking lot is full of mostly jacked up pickup trucks and old beaters that people are barely have on the road, and that's the teacher's lot. And then the kids bring all kinds of fun things. So we live in a really unique. It's a unique place to when I talk to other teachers and talk about where they teach or in their environment. So finding motivators, finding ways of reaching those kids is a constant challenge for me. And when we started talking about this empathy piece, and it became about it being about people, and us trying to always bring the human element into everything we're saying and doing, and there being an intellectual, academic, and social reason for doing that, that's I think that's the why. It makes it meaningful. It makes it applicable beyond, well, why do I need to learn this novel? Like, you don't. You honestly don't. There's not one book that I teach. Don't tell anybody. No one's going to see this, right?
No, no one.
There's not one novel that I teach in the high school. There's not one that I don't love. I love everything I teach. But there's not one that a kid can't live without. Like, they will be able to traverse society without having read one of these books. It will be okay. They'll do just fine. I made it all the way through to now, not having read some of the canon. It's gonna work out. And adopting design thinking changes that conversation. Why are we doing this? Well, I can give you 1,000 good reasons why. Understanding empathy and understanding problem solving and understanding the importance of prototyping and understanding the importance of producing and getting legitimate feedback and giving real feedback and giving a critical point of view and supporting that, and doing so with both candor and kindness, and balancing those two things. Like, if I can have that conversation with a kid when they're like, "Oh, what's the point of us doing this?" I go, you can't drop that one on me. And when that kid says, "I don't get why I have to read this novel," I can sit there and say, look, I get it. I get why you think we shouldn't. So let's talk about Of Mice and Men from a design point of view. What did Steinbeck want you? What was he trying to do for you, the reader? And and that of course is a terrible example because my kids generally flip and love that book. But with some of the other ones, it's tougher. But we had some really powerful conversations around, like Laurie Halse Anderson's Speak, because we were able to talk about the symbolism in it instead of being like, you need to know symbolism, and symbolism is important because it was, how is she playing a game with you, the user? What's she like? Why did she make that intentional choice? And it's a cool conversation to have with kids about intention, because you can talk about intention all day long about all sorts of stuff. So I think that's the why. It gives them an opportunity to have a conversation about the real.
Good answer. It's a good one. I think I want to take your English class.
Hey, open door policy. There's always room.
Excellent. All right, let's change our focus a little bit. I'll kick it back to you, Jess. And can you tell us where you were first introduced to design thinking?
Sure. And first of all, I think so much of what Dan just said totally resonated with me. And what I took from him is that we don't have to change our courses. We can keep doing what we're doing, but we can design think everything we do, which I think is pretty cool. And kind of connects back to my why. So my first experience with design thinking, and this is why I think I continue to be a design thinking geek and junkie to this day, was I was a primary test user. The context was called a schoolyard scrimmage. And if you've never had the opportunity to participate in a scrimmage, I highly recommend it. But basically, it was a cross-community, so all these different stakeholders volunteered a Saturday of their time. We came together in a really creative space. And I brought a challenge of practice, which had a lot to do with what was going on in my school's culture at the time. And I didn't realize kind of what a hefty order. I mean, changing school culture is complex, right? And so I brought this really meaty challenge to my very first design thinking experience, which was kind of a novice move as I look back on it. But it ended up being so transformative and powerful that all of these people from the business community, from nonprofits, from education, higher ed, just different paths and walks of life, all different generations and backgrounds, came together to help me improve my school's culture, which was just really, I don't know, it was just an amazing experience to have that sort of buy-in and input from people that honestly after that scrimmage, they did keep in touch and kind of follow it up, and of course wanted kind of benchmarks around what I tried, what I took from it, and how my school culture was changing and evolving as a result of that event. But they really didn't have skin in the game, right? They were just coming to kind of lend their expertise to be those, to role play the test users and to have fun and work through the process. That was so powerful, though, that my why became, how can I pay this forward? In other words, like, how can I position other educators and my colleagues in similar experiences? Because having a group of people design something for something that's a challenge that's close to your heart changes everything, right? It excites you. It makes you want to be action-oriented versus, kind of wallow in, the complaining around what's not working. I really feel like it's the easiest way to actualize solutions and growth mindset. So knowing that, like, my challenge was not unique to my school or district or context, I really just wanted to pay it forward and get as many educators immersed in a design thinking process, because I really believe at its core this has the power to transform teacher leadership as we do it, right? So much of what we talk about, I feel like, in teacher leadership in the profession is around, our voice or our blogs or our initiatives or professional learning being done to us versus kind of us taking action and transforming from within. So I just felt like it was, again, kind of as Dan explained with his students, a really powerful process that if teachers really did control and own the profession, it would look a lot, I think, like design thinking in action at every staff meeting, design thinking in action every PLC, design thinking in action across our classrooms, right? That would just be the way we do collaboration and the way that we do business, and hence it would transform every school's culture, whether that school's culture be strong and thriving or struggling. So that's kind of the crux of my why and why I continue to do it, and I've seen it play out, right, in several iterations with colleagues that have had similar experiences, and they're like, oh my goodness, I ended up with 10 ideas, and I tried 3 of them, and 2 of them worked, or 1 of them failed, but this is what I learned from it. And I think it's just been the easiest way to get educators more comfortable with taking risks, which I think is huge, and something that, again, we sort of always talk the talk with our kids, but don't always model in real time.
All right. So, and you said you also use in your classroom, Jess. So, do you take the same approach as Dan in the classroom to what you do as design thinking?
Like what he was saying about the writing process really resonated with me, because I did start to think, and again, this is where I was like, well, maybe I just am trying to make everything design thinking. I don't know if this is really true.
I am.
I was like, I don't know if factual or not. But I just, kind of shadowing kids. So one of my empathy moves was to kind of follow one of my most challenging students across his school day, because he started literacy period 1 with me, and then he, which usually got up to, a decent start, and then sort of, like, you just saw this gradual decline in everything from, like, intellectual stamina to behavior throughout his day. And, like, depending on how lunch period went, like, his afternoon was either shot or goldened, and it was very erratic, right? So I kind of followed him and shadowed him one day, and I just realized, like, so much of what was being demanded of him were his struggle areas, right? So he had to read and write across the content areas, right, which is not shocking, but again, got various levels of support kind of after leaving that literacy period, where he got obviously the most sustained support in reading books at his level and that kind of thing. But just kind of that empathy experiment of following kids across their day made me realize, like, just kind of lifted up how recursive and iterative learning anything is. So I didn't really, it had been a long time since I had worked the equations that they were doing, linear equations, which is what they were doing in math. But working linear equations is iterative, right? It's a process. Writing anything is iterative. It's a process. And so again, I began thinking, like, is everything design thinking? And or if we adopted that lens or mindset, would it change learning for a kid like Daniel, or for any student across their day, because they'd be able to so much easier make connections around, oh, when we revise our writing, it's kind of like prototyping and test using, right? Like, we're getting feedback. And I can do that in this context, or I can do it in social studies class, or I can do it with my lab report. Or say, like, when my PE teacher gives me feedback, how I respond to that feedback is going to change the way I perform, in this game 5 minutes from now, or whether my team, gets the floor or not. So I don't know. That was just kind of like an aha and maybe kind of a no-brainer, but having that experience just made me think that kids compartmentalize because we departmentalize their day. But there are so many connections that we can make, and whether it's design thinking or whether it's a school-wide created sort of norm or culture or process, learning is iterative. And I think understanding how across our content areas it is an iterative process, and just being really transparent about that with kids is a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm kind of wondering, as I'm listening to you all talk about your classrooms, what does it look like when a design thinker like yourself sits down to lesson plan?
I could show you. I can show you because it looks a lot like. Oh, I just happen to have, and I got my new Beta book. I'm very excited. I got a portable whiteboard from Beta Book Company, Kickstarter. Oh, I can't wait to play with it. The whiteboard. I mean, play with it. It's a whiteboard. It's not. It's just the size of a notebook. So it's super cool. But that's not that exciting. But yeah, my lesson plans are sketch notes now. Like they're they are this. These were my lessons. I don't know if that's not going to translate well onto screen, but they're drawings and they're arrows pointing around, and I try to do it on. These happen to be line pages, but it's yeah. My lesson plans don't start with like. They start with standards, in that I'm teach to the standards, so I know my like I've internalized them so much. I know what the kids need to do, so I don't sit down and go, okay, let's look up 1.25. I'm like, all right, no, theme. We know theme is one of the things we need to do. So what are we going to do to wrangle with that? But I kind of just I try to, instead of changing everything, because for the kids it's scary and stuff is new. So I'll just kind of plan the way I did before, but rather than looking up 15 literacy strategies to use, I go, all right, so which of the design thinking protocols apply really well here? Oh, notice, wish, wonder is a cool one. Let's use that. So when we break down a poem, let's notice, wish, wonder it first. So we're using the same language we're going to use when we give feedback to a prototype when we're doing a project that we're using when we're saying, all right, talk about this poem you saw. And it also takes away the idea that there's a right answer and a wrong answer. And at the same time, it opens up the conversation to say, well, why did you notice that? And, well, you wondered that. Why did you wonder that? Or, why is that a thing that you noticed? You noticed this and this and this and this. Now, are there trends across that? Is there an insight to be found? We bust out a bazillion Post-it notes. And so we just try to take that prototyping mindset, because design thinking, something just talking about, it reminded me of another phrase that I hear others use and I like to use, is that design thinking is the mindset. It's not a project. It's not like, oh, so we're going to do some design thinking this week, and so now we're going to do this project. It's like, or you can adopt the design thinking mindset and use that as a pedagogical lens to tackle content, and you can use it across. I was just thinking about the math piece, like just applying one of those protocols, applying rosebud thorn. What was beautiful about how you solved your homework last night? What was the thing where you're like, oh, it'd be really neat if we could. So what's your bud, and then what's your thorn? What was really, really hard about it? To have used that language to talk about your homework, instead of, all right, everybody, put your answers on the board. I'm gonna read them to you. Mark, trade your papers. 15 X's, one. Yeah, like, okay, that is a way. There are other ways that allow it to be a little more human-centered and a little less number-centered or poetry-centered. It doesn't matter what the content is. It's moving away from the content being at the core of the conversation to the mindset and the thinking being at the core. You know?
Right. I think that's key. And I think that I remember somewhere seeing, now when you held up your lesson plans, I remember seeing that you were sketchnoting.
Yeah. Oh, I love it so much.
I do too, and it's something that we do in my classroom with note taking as well. I teach that to my students. We write on windows, on desks, on floors, anywhere we can write, we write, and we sketch note, and there's Post-it notes everywhere. And I think that it's something that they're nice.
Right? Nice, big, open space, no lines, no boxes, no day of the week. I write it in, but
when your administrator wants to see that, is that good for him?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about where I teach. In all honesty and fairness, I know I have tons of friends around the country now. Yay! In large part because of design thinking, because that got me involved in Twitter and grew my professional learning network and my personal learning network, and I found my tribe, I like to say. But I know that my school, and I know that in Maine, by and large, we have a lot more freedom to teach the way that we know is best for kids. I enjoy a tremendous amount of freedom. They know that I'm tied. The work is tied to the standards. They see my grade book. They see what I do. They see the work kids produce. I'm very open and transparent about what we're doing, about how I grade, about my assessment methodologies and my philosophies. I talk a lot. as you can tell. And I have earned a lot of trust, and I don't take that lightly. I don't take it for granted. We're really fortunate. We have very supportive administrators. So if you have something in a room that works and you know it works, he's not going to walk in the door and before him she and before him another he. They're not walking through the door saying no, 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 you can't do this. We have really supportive. Superintendent, a really supportive assistant superintendent / curriculum coordinator / does everything person, and all of those folks know what I'm up to and know what I'm doing and support it. And they don't tell everyone else they have to do it, but they support what I'm doing and the work that's happening in my classroom that I'm trying to get my colleagues to buy into as they're willing to. So I know, like, if they look at they've seen my lesson plans. And when I have to write the one up for the official visit, yeah, I bust out the Roman numerals and I've got my anticipatory set and I've got my measurable objectives language and I've got my bank of Bloom's taxonomy words to use and I know what I'm doing. I know how to translate what you just saw into that. But there's no reason. There's no reason. The only reason is other policies in other states that have managed to allow curriculums and testing data instead of evidence to drive learning. And not to get on too much of a soapbox, but I know that's why so many folks feel hamstrung, because teaching has stopped being a human-centered experience for so many teachers. And that's the other reason to adopt as much of this as you can get in there. I did a session at the Fuse Atlanta experience this year on subversive DT. Like, how do you get it in there? And they're like, what do I do when I have to have test data? I'm like, yeah, still give the test, but how you got there? Hey, how about this protocol? How about how about talking about the user instead of talking about the reader? How about, just little pieces that you can work in to shift the mindset, to move the ball in whatever way you can within your locus of control. It's important.
Love it. Love it. Now, Jess, what does your lesson planning look like?
Well, I don't draw as much. I like the drawing idea a lot. I don't draw as much as I feel like I should or could. So I don't know that lesson plan. So my last school, we're kind of on a standard lesson plan, and we did share them very transparently. And so, yeah, Google Docs kind of just became my catch-all for everything, including lesson planning. And that's where all my students' work lived as well, in their own Google portfolios. But one of the things that I feel like I just going to kind of lift up from what Dan was saying is that there's lesson plans and then there's a planned lesson, right? And I think often we honor a lesson plan, what's on the paper, the Roman numeral, whatever that is or whatever our system is asking for, sometimes more than the planned lesson. And so I guess I'm not sure that my planning process changed, but I really became a stronger voice for, you know what, and I really don't want feedback on my plans unless you come and see it in action. Because, it's just words on a page, or it's drawings in a sketchbook or whatever. And if it's really a planned lesson, then again, if we think about user, that's for the teacher or facilitator, or that's for the kids, however it was created. And so to get that feedback from an external audience, not always helpful unless you're in the actual context of the environment. And I just think, if we did nothing else in our system but kind of shifted to, how do we know when lessons are planned? Like, what does learning in action look like, no matter what subject, content area, grade level? That we were just looking for thoughtful planning in the context of learning versus looking and holding up these lesson plans as models. I think it could shift everything. And again, I think one is a little more easy to check a box, right? Yep, teacher did it. Yep, they're following our 5-point plan that we decided was best as a school or whatever. One's a lot more managerially, efficient, but the other is a lot more human-centered, as Dan was saying, and more relevant for our day-to-day work, right? So if I am going to swap plans with a teacher, then I'm going to swap plans around something like, hey, let me come see you teach this, you come see me teach this, and then we'll, figure out how to do this better versus, like, I feel like, when I've shared just the plans on paper, it's not the same level of feedback.
It's swapping the idea, right? It's swapping, it's it's sharing and true collaboration around an idea rather than, well, this is just great. Now I can just do exactly what they did.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, but you're not them. So the chances of it going the same way are probably not strong.
For sure.
Yeah, never works out.
What you were just saying, what you were just saying about who's the lesson plan for, just like just a little sparked one of the other nice like side benefits of sketchnoting for me that I wasn't expecting. But I took pictures of my I take a picture of my sketch note of my plan, and I put that up on my classroom blog as like a little precursor to what we're going to be doing. And sometimes I just went with, okay, I didn't have time to actually blog what we're going to do today, but you got my sketch note, and even in confusing Mr. Ryder brain, like in drawings, at least it was a visual and not a set of very static, very formalized, just kind of like, why do I even want to read this? Why am I going to look at this? No parent's going to want to see this. No kid's going to want to see this. And at least now when they go on, they go, oh, yeah. And I could have like put up I've been chicken scratching, just all of us do, right? We all chicken scratch plans on napkins and whatever. But once I started realizing that documenting it and having that next level of transparency of putting up, so here's what my thinking was, and here's how it translated into a thing that may or may not have succeeded. It can change the dialogue in the classroom.
I think we have to remember, Jess, I just want to go back to something that you've said about that lesson plan. When we're planning for learning, active learning in a classroom, right, and we're talking about the design thinking mindset, and we're always designing in that lesson. The designing doesn't stop because the lesson is already on the paper. And when we're looking for learning and we're seeking learning in the classroom, doesn't that lesson change in a minute? It doesn't matter what's on the paper. So, as active designers in the classroom looking for learning, there's a whole lot more dynamic going on, in the classroom as teachers.
Absolutely. And I think in the vein of design thinking, right, again, if we had evaluators who maybe didn't look at plans at all, but who experienced that environment and then did a post-interview, right, with the teacher and really talked about, like, wow, when did you deviate from the plan? Why did you deviate from the plan? And that deeper level of reflection, again, I think that would be a transformative evaluation experience, kind of versus like, check, you did a great plan, but you didn't get to this part in your plan, and that's where the great conversation lies. Like, why did you decide to skip this step? Or how did you figure out kids already knew that? Or, how did you make the pacing decision to, linger a little longer in this part of the process, or whatever. I just feel like that's where the really robust feedback lives, and it's hard in our system. I feel like we're so much about efficiency that we say we value reflection, but actually honoring the time and valuing reflection would be, I never want to see your lesson plan. I actually want to, I want to come experience it for myself, and then I want to talk to you about what did you plan, what did you actually do, where did it align, where did it not, and what did you learn from that?
Right.
+1. I'm +1ing that on the Google Plus. That's no. I have to just hand signal the.
There you go. Now, in our last 10 minutes or so together, I want to switch it to the deep conversation now. So we've talked a lot about the design thinking mindset, how it works for our classrooms, and how it works for some teacher leadership. And we're talking about the big problems. And I guess this kind of connects with our classrooms and with those, I guess I don't ever call them small problems, but with the smaller scale problems in our classroom spaces, in our district spaces. But now, how do we use the design thinking mindset and put on our teacher leader hats to become the innovators for education as a whole? How do we start to use this to solve the big problems and to become a part of that conversation? Where do you think we start?
We don't, and I'm out. No, just kidding.
Well, I think Dan already talked about the trust that he, doesn't take for granted, and about the power in his teaching context. But, and I don't want to minimize or trivialize any. I know that many educators work in extremely challenging contexts. They, work under, really strict, scripted curriculum type scenarios. I don't want to trivialize or minimize that at all. I will say, though, that I think, you know, to generalize as a profession, many prep programs, many early career kind of mentoring moves, for better or worse, you know, regardless of the context, sort of train teachers to be pretty good rule followers and pretty uncomfortable with breaking the rules. And so knowing that contexts vary greatly, knowing that, again, some of us have more control and autonomy than others, I think leveraging whatever control and autonomy you have, and, you know, sort of that asking permission versus or asking forgiveness versus permission goes a long way. So again, trying something, like being brave enough to just say, I'm going to try this for a day, a week, and then I'm going to maybe videotape it. Maybe I'm going to invite my principal in. You know, if we can get some kind of good results at the small scale level, you know, I think often teachers wait for transformation to happen at the higher levels of the system instead of sort of taking charge of, or I could try something really creative in my classroom. Maybe it'll flop, maybe it'll succeed, but I could share the results either way with my colleagues, with my evaluator, and you know, sort of do more grassroots kind of extra research in my small context. I don't know. So I think sometimes, you know, we wait for trust, or we assume trust versus just kind of earning trust. And I think one of the ways you earn trust is by breaking the rules and then being bold enough to say, look, I went off script or pacing guide, and here's why, and here's the results, and could we rethink, you know, the way that we teach this book or this math unit or our master schedule, because perhaps it is not, you know, the most ideal for the kids that we serve.
I love that. You break the rules to earn your trust. I love it.
I'm big on rebellion. Like,
not me. I follow the rules. There are rules, and we dare not do. There's a reason my classroom is so far away. They put me in the corner for a reason. I am geographically at the furthest point from the main entrance because they're just hoping eventually one of these days he's just gonna fall out the other end. He'll be out there on the lawn. And then they'll be like, "Oh, that one." Jess, what you just the trust piece. So the other thing, my other passion is improvisation, and I have this kind of three-headed philosophy around improv that I apply to the design thinking world as well, and it's three pillars: accept, communicate, and trust. And those, if you do those three things in any sort of organization, in any sort of problem-solving situation, your chances of being successful in those endeavors magnify 30-fold. And when any one of those things is missing, it loses the ability to be successful. It lessens its likelihood of success 30-fold. First, you got to accept what the situation is that you're you know, in your discovery. Through the design thinking, when you're in discovery mode, you got to accept that you're finding what you're finding. When you're in empathy mode, you got to accept that that's what the person is telling you they're feeling, or that what their needs are. You can be like, "Oh, those are those needs." No. Well,
too hard.
They just said they want. No, they don't know what's good for them. How often do we have that conversation as teachers? Kids don't know. 500 of them just told us this in surveys and in conversations. Yeah, but they're 14, they're 15. They couldn't possibly have any sense of what their needs are. Okay. You know, so we have to accept that, and then we have to communicate clearly and transparently. And we have to use all of our communication skills, the bevy of tools we have available to us, both verbally and audio and video and visual and in person and out of person, and then we got to trust, and it comes back to that trust piece, and it's so hard to build that. And the beauty of design thinking is you learn how to trust yourself as much as you learn how to trust other people. You know, it's beautiful to see when a student does some authentic empathy and really talks to somebody, and then comes in and makes something, solves a problem based on that empathy work they did, and then they take it back to the person they talked to, and they're excited to see what was made. They get all jazzed up we built fidgets. We made fidgets for kids with anxiety, and they had to do all sorts of interviews with kids, and it was cool to see them hand them over to siblings, hand them over to friends, and hear the stories about them being excited about it, because there was real empathy happening. But what really happened there was they built trust. Like the kid trusted to share their information, and they honored the designer, the student designer honored that trust. And I think what's happening in terms of Lisa's original question about pushing the big challenges is we have a massive breach of trust right now. It's epidemic. The general public doesn't necessarily trust the general educator. The educators don't trust the admin doesn't trust the state doesn't trust anybody, hence, surveillance, or whatever. I don't know. That's probably a leap. That's probably not the reason why there's a surveillance program. It's probably not because of public education. But there's this healthy state of distrust, so we've got to start. Why DT? Because it builds trust. Mm-hmm. And it builds trust in each other, and it builds trust in ourselves, and if we can start getting that to grow, then we can start having real conversations about real solutions.
Wow.
Drop the mic.
And I think, yeah, you do that, and I think that's a great place to call it a night. So,
and yes, it's getting dark in here. Oh, look at that. You can see Dan again.
Yeah. Hey, Dan.
I just realized the sun has been setting the entire time. Oh, Lord.
It's cool. It's cool. We can still see you. It's been, I want to be mindful of your time, and thank you both for spending so much of it here with us tonight and talking design thinking with Redesign Challenge. And I will tell you that I have learned so much from both of you tonight, and I thank you for that. And, I'm ideating away here, and I have so much thinking to do, and I'm so glad that this is live, and I can watch it over and over again. I've got a pad full of notes in front of me, but that I can listen to it again, and I hope that our viewers tonight, we did have a few, by the way, live viewers.
Some really cool viewers who are really cool DT folk.
They are absolutely. We've had a few live viewers tonight. I hope they learned a lot from you too, because this was a fabulous conversation, and I think we should have more of them. I don't know that everybody wants to see us have conversations live like every day, but I would love to. So.
I had a blast, and I learned a lot too, so that was awesome.
I learned a ton tonight. It was cool. Hey, it was nice meeting you. That was cool.
Awesome, awesome, guys. So I will, again, thank you so much for spending your time. And Jess, I will see you on the weekend where we can do some ideating together. Cool. And Dan, I'm going to be following you a little bit more on the design thinking chats and seeing what kind of great ideas are happening on there.
Cool.
And for the rest,
can I make one very quick plug?
Go for it.
For educators interested in getting involved in design thinking, there's a very cool, from IDEO, just started a pilot project called the Teachers Guild, teachersguild.org. Just go there and explore and see what it's up to. It's really cool, kind of similar but different from the Redesign Challenge. And Redesign Challenge work is awesome. It's super cool to see design thinking kind of taking off and community building for educators. And so it's cool to have my feet and toes in all these different design thinking projects around the country. It's super rad. So
awesome. It sounds like it's really your thing. It's really your wheelhouse. So it's really exciting.
I completely agree, and I know we've mentioned Twitter and Twitter chats over and over, but with regards to your last question too, Lisa, I just think, I know we're all Twitter geeks and Twitter chat groupies, but I do think that's a really easy call to action that you can start to test ideas and fill things out on Twitter, which feels really safe, right? And just with random people all over the country before you do something sort of impactful in your classroom. And so I think that there's a lot of potential there too for educators to continue to kind of transform the profession and schooling via Twitter.
Grow your tribe.
Absolutely. That should have a hashtag. Should have a hashtag.
I might have used it a few times.
Well, thank you so much. And for those of you out there in the Redesign Challenge community, those of you watching, If you have an idea that you'd like to see us chat about in a Google Hangout, go ahead and tweet at me at Lisa_Hollenbach, or go ahead and use the hashtag RDC. And for tonight, go ahead and tweet about it, and peace out.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.